Okay, hey everyone. I'm going to start. Welcome. I'm sure there will be a few more people coming in to join us. Um, my name is Magistra Machteld Cleine. Magistra is still very new, so I'm going to probably miss a lot of that. I am a photographer, both a professional photographer and in the SCA. And today I'm going to go over why some pictures look more medieval, feel more medieval, is what I should say, instead of feeling Santa Claus. Ooh, sorry, people are coming in and I'm admitting them. Why some pictures feel more medieval than others, how we can make that happen, why it happens, and why sometimes pictures that are not medieval at all still feel very medieval. Photography is a modern media. We can go and make arguments about the camera obscura, etc., but that's technical stuff, and it is definitely has no bearing on the photography that we do this day in the SCA. However, even though we have a modern medium, we use sometimes techniques that have been used throughout centuries of portraiture, of paintings, and of other things. I'm going to share my screen, get you through some pictures, talk a little bit about your own experience. You can keep yourself muted if you want to. There's going to be a few times when I have questions for you. If you want to join in, good. If not, I will cover the silence because I can talk through everything. First, let me go start sharing the screen. There you are. Here you go. And let me do that in slideshow mode. There you are. Just what I said. Why certain images feel medieval even if they aren't. Slight disclaimer, I am not on my own computer. We had a mishap. So sometimes I'm going to have to be looking for buttons. But not now. What we are going to talk about first is our paradigm, our medieval colored glasses, or the building of our library of our imaginations. All of us have a memory of how we started getting this affection for the Middle Ages. If you are of a certain age, being me, being close to 50, it was probably Ivanhoe and Robin Hood, the movies that came out in the 80s, or even the 1950 movies that were on constant rerun. If you're of a more modern generation, you might have some video games that you absolutely love. My son's a big gamer. Even people from my generations are big gamers. It just never clicked for me. And of course, if you're lucky enough to live in a place with big museums and wonderful historical buildings, they surround you, they shape you, and they shape what you think of as the Middle Ages. Before anyone asks about my accent, I'm originally from Belgium, which is a country that's younger than the US, actually, but has a history that goes much, much longer, which means that every school trip we drove half an hour or an hour and we were at some Roman ruins, or the village church that you went to happened to be a 500-year-old cathedral. I mean, I literally got married in a 14th to 16th century cathedral because that was my church. That was where I happened to go. So for some of us, it basically the architecture, the art surrounds us, and we've been that. For other people, it's movies, books, video games. Something started that interest in the Middle Ages, and you start to build an idea of what the Middle Ages look like. We recreate mostly that feeling in photography. We do not always recreate exact medieval art. There's a difference between what feels medieval and what is medieval. And I'm going to go through these things and why the feeling is way more important. These two pictures here on the left is my own work. It was photographed at a protege ceremony at House Corvus at War of the Wings. And while it may look posed, it actually isn't. My only contribution as a photographer was to beg them to let me move the candelabra a bit closer before they did the ceremony, but that's all. If you look on the right side, there is a painting from Rembrandt. It's a 1638 oil on canvas. and it is from the Wedding Feast of Samson. And immediately we can see a parallel in both pictures. You have a similar fading into the darkness of the background. You have the people that are on the outskirts that are getting much, much more obscured. You have the light that goes on the person in the middle, and that falls with that golden glow as if it's an actual fire. In this case, it was an actual fire. But the combination of the colors, the reds that fade to a darkness, the darker figures in the background, the bright lights, and the shadows, get you the feeling that, whoa, this picture feels medieval. Now, if we contrast this with the next, which was taken on the same occasion, on the right, we have Rembrandt again, Prodigal Son. On the left, we have the same ceremony at House Corvus. In itself, this should also look medieval. And this is not a bad picture. It's a good picture. I'm happy with it. But if you compare this one with this one, the former feels more medieval. Why is that? It's a simple matter of blue versus brown. Right here, all my background is darkened out and gets a brownish feeling. It has the patina of age to it. While here, we shot in a different direction and we get much more that blue of the night sky. Because of that blue, and if you compare it with a Rembrandt painting, it just feels more modern. It has a different feeling. It's a good picture, it's a wonderful picture, but it doesn't have the same, ooh, it feels as if it is medieval, even though there are no orange coolers and anything else in the background. My first recommendation when people ask me about photographing in the SCA, aside from knowing your camera and knowing all the details, is go look at a lot of art. And it doesn't just have to be medieval art. It doesn't have to be period art. It can be any type of art. Because that way you are building up a library in your imagination and you will see things even without seeing it. This picture, for example, I've had it for 5 years. The picture on the middle is of Queen Lynette of Atlantia when she took the throne. And there was always something about that picture which isn't posed that told me this is right. There's something about it that works. And I had no clue why. And then when I was looking for another picture in this same class, I noticed the hands. And I came across my picture of Elizabeth of York, and I realized it's that. It's the position of the hands. It's the holding of that hands. It's the rings on that hands and the look that is not aimed at you immediately. It is a portrait technique that is not unique to this single picture of Elizabeth of York, which is by an unknown artist, and there are several versions of it. But it's not unique to this. If you go look at a lot of Renaissance and medieval pictures, that gesture with the hands, the rings, the display of wealth, the slightly indirect look, it is something that comes back. Even though I did absolutely at that moment, while I was taking that picture, did have no idea that that was what's going on, I knew the moment was right. I knew this would form a portrait, a picture. The same happened here. This is a much more of a busy slide. On the left is the Descent of the Cross by Rubens. And this is actually a painting that was in the cathedral that I mentioned earlier. I've stared at that painting for so many Sundays just because it was there. And I've seen the tourists go see it. I've seen it. But there is a technique in it. And every tour guide will tell you that, look how the line of light from the figure of Christ will guide you from the head towards along the length of his body towards the people pulling. it pulls your eye throughout that painting. On the right, we have another picture that was taken at the elevation of Mistress Judika. And again, it is a rare moment. I'm standing at the back. I'm shooting down, and I see the sword being pulled. I don't know why at that moment, or I do know why at that moment, but at the moment, I don't know why I know this photograph is it. But if you follow the line, which you automatically do in this photograph, where your eyes go along the line of the sword, and it automatically you are drawn to it. You are drawn to that point where the sword is being drawn out of the sheet. And prolonging it, you will see at the back a woman in white. Because she, by sheer coincidence, is standing right in the length of that sword, your eyes get guided through this picture in almost the exact same way. It's a technique that we see again and again when classic painters guide us through a story they want to tell. If you want to recreate that feeling in an SCA photograph, you train your eye to recognize those patterns. You train your eye to find the light, to find the shadows. And sometimes when you are developing your picture or later editing it, you crop with that in mind so that your eye gets guided throughout that same exact ratio. You cannot do that if you haven't built up that library. So looking at art makes our brain recognize these patterns and allows us to use the same techniques that classic painters do without actually being a painter. Blame the pre-Raphaelites. And before that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and go talk with you. A lot of the photographs that we feel are medieval or look medieval don't look medieval. They look pre-Raphaelite, and I'm coming back in on that why that is later. But I'm going to ask for the people who want to speak up for a moment, what is the image that, especially among the pre-Raphaelites, what is the image that you have that pictures the Middle Ages?
Oh, it would be the picture of the woman in the white, and she's embracing the knight or giving him a sword or something. There's a couple of different versions of.
Yep. Yeah, it's either the accolades
and it's 1900. Yes.
Yeah, the accolade of Leighton, because, and I'm not putting anyone on the spot because I have not. This is the third time I teach this class, and it's the third time somebody mentions that picture, and I have it in my slideshow for that exact reason. The amount of us who have that single picture either have had it as a screensaver, have had it hanging as a poster. The amount of people of us who have that picture is astounding. And there are other images.
I think it is, yeah.
A painting. Is there a scene from a movie? Is there anything? What was your medieval memory that said, oh my God, that's the thing. That's what I wanted. And they're different for all of us.
You want us to respond again?
I would love it if you responded, but you don't have to.
I think that painting is the SCA.
Yeah. And
that's the dream.
For a lot of people, and especially for a certain generation, I'll come back why that is so much and so emblematic for so many. And I even have a specific slide for that picture. So I expected people to love it. Anyone else? Anyone? For me, it was Ivanhoe. I will, and it wasn't even, I'm from 1976, so it should be the 1982 Ivanhoe, but it wasn't. It was the 1953 Ivanhoe with Elizabeth Taylor, and especially that one scene at the tournament where he lowers his lance in front of her character Rebecca. That was, for me, that was, oh, is there anyone else? Either a actual medieval painting, a building, a moment in TV, video, whatever.
Errol Flynn's Robin Hood.
Ooh, yep, classic.
Yeah.
Classic.
I must have watched that a million times as a kid.
Mm-hmm. And for a lot of what comes up for and I keep saying the younger generation because I have a 16-year-old son now who has made it clear how old I am by trying to get his driver's license. Um, Lord of the Rings for an entire generation, and this is actually a woman who I befriended when she was 14 and I was in my 20s, and we got along so well that she became a bridesmaid by the time I was 30. For her, it was Lord of the Rings, that feeling, the moment in which Theoden King stands alone, not alone, things like that. Those iconic images,
Well, and I
they
think that's
build
deeply
what we think
woven.
of. Sorry?
Yeah, I think that's also deeply woven into the roots of the SCA. If you look back at ceremonials from the West Kingdom and the earliest ceremonials we have so much in our history as a group that is based on the Lord of the Rings and high fantasy. There are so many modern popular fantasy authors that are part of the beginning of the SCA that it's really woven into our dream and what we think of.
Absolutely. I mean, Merciless Lackey. And if you see the very first invitation to the SCA, it invites elves coming along. In the Bardic tradition, you can see that a whole lot of our SCA songs are more based on, say, 60s and 70s folk traditional songs than on actual period song. I mean, even though they go on period events and everything. So a lot of our feeling of what belongs as medieval is not. So I'm going to give one more chance. Anyone else wants to share a moment or anything that was their medieval impression? If not, I'm going to go right back to my slideshow.
But I want to say one more thing. The movie Excalibur, which came out when I guess maybe I was in college or something, that one had a profound effect. It was so beautiful.
Absolutely. And depending on how old you are and which movie aesthetic you have and impacted you, you will have a different library of the imagination. And some core things will transcend because a lot of those people, as we will see later on, were influenced by the people who came before. The very dark aesthetic that we now have in many of the sort of medieval movies where everything is dark washed and you get all the bright colors away. It's a harkening back to that Rembrandt paintings, but it also completely ignores like the very bright, vibrant stuff that we got in the 50s. So I'm going to go back to my pre-Raphaelites and share my screen with you. Let's see. There you go. And I say intentionally blame the pre-Raphaelites because a lot of what we feel is medieval is not actually medieval. It is based on pre-Raphaelites. And why specific the pre-Raphaelites? Two reasons. One of their favorite subjects was sort of a very romanticized version of the Middle Ages. And if you get not just, Robin Hood or Shakespeare, we have like three Ophelias in here. They're all by Waterhouse. We have Ophelia in the meadow. We have Ophelia gathering flowers. We have Ophelia drowning herself. These are very period, SCA period subjects, but they are not treated the way they would have been in period. They have a romanticized version, but they feel so right because for so many people, they are so ingrained in our library of the imagination. For some of it, it was like that, as somebody earlier said, that is the dream. That's how it felt. One of the reasons for that is actually technology. I'm wonderfully teaching to you now over Zoom, but technology has progressed at a pace that allows things to spread more often. And at the time of the pre-Raphaelites, it wasn't the birth of the printing press, but it was sort of the birth of the very early color lithographies that could be easily reproduced. which means that these paintings were the first paintings with a medieval theme that could be cheaply and easily reproduced and hung in people's homes or be in books, which meant that people who illustrated books later on frequently looked back to this aesthetic, which is one of the reasons why it is such a persistent aesthetic and why for many of us it is still the pinnacle of how medieval art looks, even if we know it doesn't. Going forward. Bye. There you are. This is one of my earlier sessions, and it has that pre-Raphaelite feel. I'm distilling it a little bit. It has the wildness of nature in contrast to the extremely cultured figure of a woman. It has the downward gaze, the averted eyes, the elegant hands. And I promised you I would come back to the accolade, and here we have it. Some images have reached that absolute iconic status that we recognize their lines even without realizing. And sometimes we realize it. This is the elevation ceremony of Sir Alain to the Order of the Pelican. And the moment I actually saw this, I knew the image. It is part of, because her tippets on the dress, the white tippets on the gold-colored gown, they mimic the long blue sleeves that we see in the picture here in the accolade. The length of her veil, as you may notice if you go compare them side by side, is almost exactly the same as the uncovered hair. And especially the bend of her arm and the bend at the wrist. I can't really replicate it for Zoom without doing unnatural contortions, but the length, the way her arm is positioned so much replicates that people immediately feel or recognize this image. If you doubt that you will recognize these lines so readily yourself, I invite you, if you're 18 plus, because DeviantArt has a wonderful, colorful array of art. Not all of it is suitable for those of us who are minors. But if you're 18 plus, go to DeviantArt and just type in the accolade. From anthropomorphic to animal to furry to anything you will see this scene replicated and you will recognize it. I don't care if the person has a fox head or not, you will feel this scene and you will recognize it. Some poses translate instantly. As I said before, I'm dealing with some technical difficulties. This is not my computer. So I have here at the side a piece of paper with all my names of my paintings on. This is actually the Portinari altarpiece, which has great historical importance. Basically, this was an Italian merchant who commissioned it from a Flemish or Dutch at the time. It sort of interchanges painter Hugo van der Goes as an altarpiece for a church in Italy. And all the painters in Italy admired it so much that it started really a trend to copy this style. But what I want to draw your attention to are two parts. First of all, the sides of the triptychs. We see, and this is customary, if you have a film these days, if you have a museum exhibit, you have sponsors. If you have a beautiful altarpiece at this time, you also have sponsors. They are your patrons and you want to make them happy. So to do that, you include them in the painting. On the left side, we have our commissioner, Thomas Portinari. On the right side, we have his wife. He is accompanied by his children. His sons. She's accompanied by their daughter. And in the background, we have their patron saints, just so everybody knows very clearly how wonderful and virtuous these people are, and that they gave money for this painting. The image we have of them with their hands praying is so iconic that if you put it today, it immediately references these images. It references 1,000 paintings in which you see patron saints and everything in the sides. Now, in contrast, if you go to the middle and we see our Virgin Mary, there's something very remarkable about her. Half of the people have their hands aimed up in prayer. She has her hands aimed down. Anyone want to guess why?
Because
Before her on the
well, because Jesus is Lord and she's praying to him and he's right in front of her.
Exactly, because he is right in front of her. Her hands are aimed downwards. You can also see that some of the angels, some of them, not all of them have gotten the message, but some of the angels are aiming towards it. Others are having their hands still folding. If you see, however, our patron saints, with no image of Jesus right in front of them, their hands are up. Because at that point, Jesus has been ascended up to heaven and therefore up. But what we also see with Mary is it's not just the classic prayer pose. Her hands are slightly spread and they form a heart over her womb. Anyone who's had plenty of friends who've had their birth pictures or their pregnancy pictures done knows this. Every modern photographer has done this. You know, the big pregnant belly and then the heart over the belly. It's a pose that still is done today. But if we look back to the next, on the left, this is a picture I took at an SCA event. This wonderful gentleman, Gilbert, is one of my favorite models. Also one of the first people who started trusting me to make more posed portraits. This was one of the golden light sessions. It is a posed picture deliberately where we have that light that reflects off that tree trunk and that instantly recognizable picture that we have there, kneeled position, shoulders straight, eyes cast down, heads in the prayer pose. You can almost see it reflected in the middle, which is from the triptych of Jean de Tromp. And it's a side panel for an altarpiece of the baptism of Christ. On the right, you see my son, who was preparing for his first communion. And if you see older first communion pictures, this same pose from like 500 years ago is still instantly recognizable. If you want, and if your subject is comfortable with this, because you have to be careful, not everyone is religiously comfortable with adjusting this pose, with taking this pose. And we're talking a little bit more about that later. But if your subject is careful, is comfortable with this, it is a very easy way to immediately reference within your picture. Some images don't build a library of the imagination, and some change throughout the years, and some may be different for different generations. We've talked a little bit about it. The Lord of the Rings is a great example. The imagery of the Lord of the Rings from the movie, the original movie, the Peter Jackson movie, not the original movie, but the Peter Jackson movie leaned very heavily on the work of Howe, one of the classic illustrators of Tolkien. These images have been part of the building of the library of imagination for a generation, while some of you will recognize the phrase, where there's a whip, there's a way. And if you recognize this, you're either a Tolkien fan or you're older, my generation, because this was a illustrated version of the Lord of the Rings. And once you can always go and look that up. And there you are. You can always go and look that up. And I'm going to share a little bit going to go a little bit back. Where are you? There you are. Because a different medium will make a different impression. New images are just as important because they make us feel. What was important about the Ivanhoe movies was not how historically accurate they were. but how they made us feel to be in that moment. Are there any gamers among my audience? It depends on how many I have. Is there anyone who can place this image? I've had one class so far where somebody was almost levitating from their chairs to tell me what the left image was. It is an image from a video game, a pretty recent video game, actually. I think I'm going to check because otherwise I'm going to be say it wrong, from 2018. So very recent, 5 years ago, and it's from Kingdom Comes Deliverance. I am not a gamer at all. I stumbled across this image a few years ago when I wanted to make something that was some art for graphic art for something, and I stumbled about it, and I was like, this image talks to me. And I'm gonna give you a moment. I would like people to, for a moment, look at it, and then I'm gonna come back to you and ask you some questions, and tell me, what does this image say to you? If you had to describe the feeling in this image, what is it? I have one more look, and I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
Yep.
Anyone, if you want to go, and you can speak and tell me what you feel.
Well, I kind of feel like it evokes a sense of like despair and of like, I can't do this anymore. Like the whole bow down, like I'm done type of
I'm done. The exhaustion is what I frequently get. It is someone who has fought, futile or not, but they have fought and they are absolutely exhausted. Anybody else who wants to put it in their own words?
Maybe a feeling of not just exhaustion, but pensiveness.
Pensiveness. Was it worth it? I have battled. I have fought. I may be getting up, because somehow you don't feel like he is done. I'll go back to it in a moment. You don't feel like he is done. You think this is a moment where he is exhausted, where he can't go on anymore. And yet you still have the feeling that in a few more moments, in 5 more minutes, he will pull up, grab that sword, and join back in.
Yes.
Some of the people who are very familiar with SCA Bardic have told me that it reminds them of the song Born on the List Field.
Ah, yes.
Because we see someone who is older. This is not his first battle. It doesn't tell you about the first battle. This is not a recruit who just encounters the horrors of war. This is someone for whom he has done this before. He is exhausted. He wonders possibly about what the use of all of this is. And then you still have that feeling that in a little bit, he will get up, he will tiredly shoulder that blade, and he will go on. I'm going to go back to sharing. There we are. This was one of the cases where I absolutely wanted, sorry, let me go back. I love that image, and I asked for volunteers to create it for me. The only this is Sir Mark Green, who is a wonderful bladesmith. He's also been on Fortune Fire. He's a wonderful knight, wonderful artisan, and he was willing. We did not make an exact recreation. I can show you, but that's not going to be as interesting to you. There are subtle differences in it, but we wanted a similar pose, and we were extremely lucky that the lake in the back gave us that beautiful gold backlash that we had. Now, on contrast, this is art from the same video game. These two images are completely different. While the first one was a recreation, this is, man, horse, flag, we have nothing on the left side that we have on the right side. And yet we get that similar feeling here. Looking back, was it defeat? Was it victory? Was it a victory that feels like a defeat? In both images, you have the tired, soot-soaked aftermath of battle recreated. You have some similarities, the grays, the silvers, the choices that are made. But what translates most is the feeling. So whether your source is a pre-Raphaelite painting, an Ivanhoe movie, a Rembrandt painting, or a portrait by the most famous medieval artist ever, Mr. Anonymous, whatever the inspiration is, the impact of your photograph depends on whether it feels medieval to the person who sees it, and it depends on how it makes them feel, much more than how accurately you recreate a period medieval piece of art. Illustrated right here, the idea of what is a queen. We have here on the left the Saxon's Atlas, which is attributed to Remigius Hogenberg from 1579, perfectly period. We have Queen Victoria, the George Hayter portrait. We have Queen Elizabeth during the opening of the House of Lords in 1966. And then you have a picture that I took of Queen Adelheid at her second coronation. Clearly the colors are different. This is again like the picture earlier of Queen Lynette. This is an in-the-moment photograph, not a post-portrait. If I posed it, I might have chosen darker colors, etc., on the background, and I can edit stuff. But this is a perfectly in-the-moment portrait that people had, yes, this one. And why that one? It is because it translates a pose. You have the white dress that you see in two of these pictures. You have the enthroned feeling, which makes the setting, which makes the curve. You can also see this back in statues of the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary enthroned is a classic, and I can probably throw you another 5 images throughout history, but I figured these with some classic queens are an easy reference point, that the Queen Victoria painting harkens back to the style of the Queen Elizabeth painting, that the Queen Elizabeth II painting harkens back to the Queen Victoria painting, and so on and so on. These are images styles that have become iconographic. They are, and it goes even further back to Mesopotamia in some of how these poses have become part of queen, mother, virgin, the person of authority that we approach at the seat of wisdom. That classic framework is something that translates really well. And if I had made the same picture and I widened the crop and I had a king in there, I had both king and queen, it would not have that same appeal. It would be a beautiful picture, but it would not go to that part of our brain in which this particular iconographic pose has been inscribed. Mix and match, crossing genres. These are, again, pictures taken at the exact same place where I took those earlier night pictures. Give me a moment. Right here, picture on the right with Sir Mark Green, taken at the exact same location as these pictures. And they have a very different feel. They have the feeling of a 1970s-ish romance cover. I'm saying 1970s because in the 80s we got the bodice rippers and the giant chests, and it doesn't feel like that. It feels more like the ones that had the little oval cover on the front, where you see the couple exchange possibly a chaste kiss, or even before, where they just looked at each other meaningfully, which I'm going to go back to something completely different, but if any of you have seen the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice, the 1980s or early 1990s version with Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy, you will see this exchange of looks while we are dancing. That is an almost iconographic moment that people see back in paintings. The fact that we are not kissing, but we are looking at one another has the same impact as the actual kiss, or even sometimes a stronger impact. But what I want to talk about most here is the background. We have our gold. This gold goes back all the way back to iconographic images, and I didn't put that right in here. If you go to Orthodox or medieval icons, and everybody that I talk to here probably can imagine them. If not, you Google them after this. But if you just Google Orthodox icon, you will see that all the background has that golden coloring. And it has a specific reason. It refers to the wealth, the luxury of the feeling of uniting with heaven. And somebody else should do a completely other course on icons and what they all mean. But the gold is something that translates, and that over the periods people have done in paintings. In the image there at the bottom is from the newest version. It's the Amazon Rings of Power series. And I tried looking up who the cinematographer were, but there were like 700, well, 17 people mentioned, and different directors and different cinematographers. So there's not one artist that I can credit. But because that gold is such a classic background, it is something that you refer back to. And it gives you your picture that there is something that transcends time in it. Doing that allows you to try a completely, a variety of poses, classic or not, and still get a little bit of that otherworldly feel. This has more of a fantasy feel than it has an accurate medieval feel. At the same time, these are some of the people who are most accurately dressed. But because of the pose and because of the background, you get more of this is a fantasy, this is something to step in on. With your genres, and that's why I come back to what I said in the beginning, look at a lot of art. Don't just look at art in museums. I love museums, go to as many museums as you can go to, but look at video games, look at photography. There are some people in the SCA that I love photographing with an inspiration of the silver screen goddesses. One moment. Sorry, Mama is busy. I locked that door because I knew that was going to come. But this is something that you can see and can translate. Hunting for what you can't really remember. The library becomes vast. If you look at a lot of art, sometimes you will have a picture that calls upon you and you don't know why. It's like, it reminds me of something. On the top right, you will see an entry from the Agricultural Guild of Atlantia at Arts and Science display at War of the Wings. I literally came upon it while walking through the exhibit, and I had like, yes, this. And not just this, but it needs to be framed just so. And I photographed it, and I developed it. And it's like, why? And then I remembered. It's those still lives of vegetables, and why did people do that again? And it is photographing or painting your abundance. Fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, nuts, eggs. These are a sign of how wealthy you are, just as much as how much silk you have hanging on you. So a little bit after our period, mostly Baroque, but some of them in our period. This is on the left, we have our fruitish is from, let's see, from 1599, and on in the back, on the bottom, we have the well-stocked kitchen with Jesus in the house of Martha and Mary from 1566. This is why some moments strike us as, oh, yes, this, and you don't know why. Now, to be fair, if they had actually set it up to look like that painting, the wool probably would not have been in the Amazon Prime box that you can see right there in the back. But the rest of the composition gives you that feel. Someone displayed their bounty. In the bottom, you can see on the left, you can see a blue barrel, like one of our pretty blue, it's not a water barrel, I think this was a garbage can. This is not an image that in itself completely evokes period. But we have a dead bird. Dead birds are period. I'm not sure why, but these days we are not confronted very much with dead birds unless they're roadkill. Someone having a plumed bird and being about to prepare it for dinner is this very, very evocative feel. It's also one of the scenes that you will frequently see if there is a kitchen, which you don't always see in medieval movies. But if there is a kitchen, you will have your ham hanging and you will have a plumed bird hanging somewhere, or someone is cleaning a plumed bird. Because through paintings like this, we completely have that feeling that a plumed bird is medieval. And because it's something that we don't encounter in our modern life, having that immediately gets to that part of our brain where that library of our imagination is stored. And you feel it and you see it. Last but not least, your library has become self-aware. When you're in the game for a bit longer, or even when you're new to the SCA, but when you have been a medieval or history nerd for a very long time, you go to the point where you don't just take in art, you're the person who is haunting museum websites. I know this. I have friends who are haunting museum websites to find the exact diameter of a tiny glass pearl to find out how something looked. Because of that, we get images of how things might have looked if we had come upon them fresh. And the last 10, 15 years, there is a lot of movement within museum development, within art restoration, to help people see how things might have looked. One of the common things is that, and I'm going to come back for a moment and ask people a question, and I will make sure not to drive it too long. Okay. If you imagine in your mind a medieval church, what's the color of the church? Anyone?
Like inside the church or outside the church?
Inside or outside, both.
Generally,
Gray.
when I first,
No,
yeah,
historically it's been red and blue.
That's the thing. This is where two images conflict. But normally, normal people who have not been into either a lot of church architecture or a lot of history, they will imagine a white gray Gothic church. Remember the arches? You can actually see the same thing in The Lord of the Rings when you picture Osgiliath, and when you picture the white city of Gondor. The architecture, especially in the movies, you can see a lot of architecture that is based on what we imagine church architecture. Now, of course, in the last few years, restoration techniques have allowed us to reconstruct. And what we see is that these churches inside were vibrant with color, like not just the stained glass windows. Usually we know about the stained glass windows, but the rest of the interior, not just the mosaic, the walls were frequently painted such vibrant colors. For some people, the impression, and that is correct, that is the most, unless you know a lot about church architecture, or like us, our libraries have become self-aware because we self-correct our images. The first image is white and gray because that's what we think. I think it's the Cathedral of Chartres or Nantes, and you have to look it up. they have done a project in which they had the outer entryway with the statues of all the saints, and where they projected the colors that they could reconstruct. And somebody in the chat says the French Reformation and iconoclast movement plastered over most of cathedral walls. That is exactly correct. I'm from Antwerp, where the iconoclast was one of the highest order, because we were right on the border of the battlefield between the Protestant and Catholic power struggle. And it's one of the reasons why we have an image now that of Roman and Gothic cathedrals that is actually based on a lot of what happened after, because a lot of that color was either destroyed, and some of it also was just faded out after centuries. It's like we think of Greek statues. We always think of them as white, even though, again, if your library has become self-aware, you know that they weren't. So let me go back for just one moment to my share screen. This is a recreation of a burial. It was done a few months after the elevation of Dame Asa. I think it's Olam Asa that her preferred title is. And she has a pre-Christian Iron Age woman persona. And all of these, or many of these, are her elevation gifts. Now, nobody of us has ever seen this in and of itself, but somehow we recognize this as a burial image because we have all haunted the archaeological articles in which they reconstruct how it would have looked. We know that this is a pre-Christian burial because of the way the hands are positioned. They are not positioned in that prayer pose that we recognize from earlier. If you think of one of those beautiful graves, the white tombs, the effigies, sorry, I couldn't think of the word. If you think of the effigies, we almost always think of those beautifully folded hands like this. Instead, when you come for a pre-Christian or non-Christian burial, we have different positioning. The S shape was meaningful. We can see those in many of the reconstructions of burial scenes. And of course, those always go based on architectural evidence, but they're not correct. Now, when making this photograph, because this is obviously, very, very obviously a posed photo, and we are not going to discuss some very sketchy stuff I did with a ladder and a boulder and things to get that, and there were chiggers involved, and we are not going to speak about all that. But we had a choice when we set it up. Either we could do it in a flat light, in a nice shadowed place where we don't have that light and shadow play, or we can do it here where we had that play of light. And we decided that if we had a flat shadowed light, it would look like a museum reconstruction. However, by having this dappled light that comes through, it is more like you accidentally took a journey in the TARDIS or whatever your time-traveling device of choice is, a rift, a whatever, and you stumbled upon this grove where this woman has been laid to rest, probably like 3 minutes after her relatives left. And you can read so much from that image, because again, this is an image for those that have become more, have self-aware libraries. They have haunted the websites of museums. They have haunted all these things, and they now self-correct their images. There we go. That is sort of my my class. This is me guiding you through a whole bunch of art and poses and photographs. And my main end of the class message is go forth and look at lots of art, and then think about how can you translate that in your photographs, because it is the techniques, and some of those, as we saw in our picture with the golden backgrounds, some of these techniques have been carried on from 9th century Orthodox relics to 20th century Gustav Klimt to 21st century romance novel covers, and you will recognize them. This is why certain pictures feel medieval, because they directly appeal to a library that is in the head of people who love the Middle Ages. And some of our images are correct or come from study, like the burial image. They are based on architectural practices, and they're beautiful and they're powerful. But they are not more powerful than, say, the knight dealing down with the exhaustion and battle weariness, which actually comes from a video game. It feels just as right. And I can, as you see, I can probably go on about this for way, way too long, and I'm not going to hold you hostage much longer. But I can go through the paintings and the statues, and I can tell you the techniques that I borrowed from each one, the lights, the shadows, the lines, the focus, the vision of the canvas, etc., etc. But it is about more than that. If you try to recreate a painting, sometimes recreating an image is great. You will have one image that says, yes, I'm currently hoping to do a Waterhouse inspired thing with a favorite Laurel who is an embroiderer, and I want that Waterhouse, the weaver from the Lady of Shalott, because it has the reds and the blues and the vibrant and everything for her. Sometimes replicating or directly referencing is perfectly fine. But you want more than that. You want to have that. You want to have the feeling that an original image spoke to you and translate that to your people. And when you do that, people will say, yes, this feels like the dream. This feels like the SCA. This feels right. So that's it for me.